Crystal, interesting topic. Thank you so much for sharing that. I had no idea that was going on. And I agree with your conclusion. This man must be released. I think it's crazy that he's brought criminal charges against him. Your video raised some really interesting questions about Antifa's involvement in this whole thing. Ongoing questions that really get to the heart of freedom of association, and I think a lot of the issues that are facing our nation right now. And I'm really interested to see how it all plays out with Antifa's involvement. Um, in NAACP v. Claiborne, the court established two rules that I think are relevant to Antifa's involvement. The first is to punish association with a group. That's my blue book. To punish association with such a group, there must be clear proof that a defendant specifically intends to accomplish the aims of the organization by resort to violence. So, was the journalist helping accomplish the aims of the organization by aiding in the proliferation of violence? Does taking a video of someone else's violence and live streaming it count as violence in and of itself? Personally, I doubt it. I would imagine this actually implicates freedom of the press, regardless of whether or not he was spreading a message of violence and trying to encourage others to violence. As NAACP pointed out, you can't hold someone liable just for using violent words unless someone immediately commits a violent act as a result. And so I think just live streaming it, but to me, that seems more like a freedom of the press issue, more so than a freedom of association issue. But we haven't gotten to freedom of the press yet, so I guess that remains to be seen. But the journalist himself, I really don't feel like was committing a crime. He wasn't inciting a riot. He wasn't using words. He was just observing it. But now we get to the second rule established by NAACP v. Claiborne. An organization may be held responsible for the acts of its agents throughout the country that are undertaken within the scope of their actual or apparent authority, or for other conduct of which it had knowledge and specifically ratified. So can Antifa be held liable for these violent acts? Well, there's a number of problems with this question. First, Antifa is short for anti-fascism, and this refers not only to a number of organizations, but to the larger anti-fascist movement as a whole. There's no centralized Antifa organization. All of the groups are autonomous. There's no official Antifa mission statement. In NAACP, the court looked at NAACP's mission statement and official policies to find that NAACP itself did not support unlawful acts. So what would the court look to here? Well, probably they would look to something like this article by Sean Milstein, which describes the Antifa movement, and that's also the citation for all the things I just said about Antifa as a movement. So there is a lot of evidence that Antifa members will fight to stop fascists at any cost, including using violence. This article talks quite a bit about that. In an interview with Wes Enzina, a reporter who has been following Antifa for quite some time, Scott Simon, the reporter for NPR, asked Enzina whether they would use violence, and Enzina said, yes, I think they're not opposed to violence. Enzina elaborated, they're dedicated to the idea that fascists and white supremacists and neo-Nazis don't respond to legal mechanism, and that you can't rely on legislative efforts or police to prevent them from recruiting and organizing. So he's essentially saying that Antifa is okay with being unlawful because their enemy is being unlawful. It's a pretty circular argument. Enzina brings up Jim Crow and slavery and the Holocaust. And, basically Antifa's argument is that if we allow them to progress to that point, it's our duty to stop them by any means necessary before we get to that point. And that is the approach of the Antifa movement. So Antifa may be a movement that supports using unlawful actions to advance its goals. This is not okay under NAACP v. Claiborne. That is exactly what is not okay for an organization to do. That you would be allowed to find someone guilty by association in that case if they were aiding in unlawful acts to advance the unlawful goals of the organization. But Antifa, if there is no organization, who would be held liable? What aims would the photojournalist be advancing in order to be found liable under an NAACP analysis? It's a really interesting and complicated issue. I'm really looking forward to finding out what freedom of the press will illuminate for us in this case. And once again, Crystal, I just want to say thanks for bringing this to our attention.